Millions of tourists are already flocking to Japan, sports stadiums around the country are filling back up to pre-pandemic capacity, and foreign cruise ships restarting operations after 3 long years are just a few major updates that highlight Japan's slow but steady return to pre-pandemic normalcy. Today we will cover how this applies to both tourists and residents alike, and what to expect as Japan continues to adapt and live with COVID. So without further delay, let's just jump into it. One of the most notable updates is the arrival of the Amadea, the first foreign cruise ship to arrive in Japan after 3 long years. The Amadea pulled into Shizuoka just a week ago with 800 tourists and was greeted by an excited Japanese welcoming party and performers. What's even better, this is just the first of 212 cruises that are scheduled to arrive throughout 2023. And foreign cruises aren't the only thing that are finally restarting. A popular ferry service between South Korea and Japan has also resumed operations after 3 years. Once a famous getaway for South Koreans that was shut down due to the pandemic, Japan's Tsushima Island will finally accept tourists via this popular ferry service once again. And just days after reopening, this ferry service has already been fully booked for the next 2 months. And this is good news for both tourists and residents, because these are just more positive signs that point towards Japan getting closer and closer to pre-pandemic normalcy. On that same note, we should expect to see more and more flights to become available as the country continues to adjust to COVID-19 and increases its capacity for tourism. And like any supply and demand dynamic, as more flights become available, we should hopefully begin to see a decline in flight prices in the near future. On another positive note, it's not just the transportation services that are beginning to return to normal, but sporting events and public venues are beginning to see a return to normalcy as well. In a recent baseball game, Japanese fans were allowed to clap, cheer, and vocally support their teams for the first time since the pandemic began. While this might not seem important to you or me, this is a great step forward as it shows the public is beginning to adapt to a life with COVID and getting closer to what life was like before the pandemic. To provide some context, I attended one of Japan's biggest public festivals held every year, Oktoberfest. When I first stepped into the venue, one of the things I immediately noticed were signs everywhere requesting guests to not clap and cheer when music was being played due to concerns about COVID-19. Now, all these restrictions have disappeared in just a few short months. That's pretty fast, especially when you consider how long it took for Japan to open up again. This drastic change in attitude towards COVID is also becoming apparent in their sporting events attendance. In only the first 2 months of Japan's soccer league, attendance numbers have jumped over 30% compared to the 2022 season and over a 300% jump from the 2021 season. Not surprisingly, this jump in attendance has been a direct result of the similar vocal restrictions finally being lifted in the soccer league as Japan returns to normal. While tourists might not typically attend these events, it still has a major impact on where tourists typically visit. With spring and summer professional sports kicking off in the next few weeks, you can expect a lot more people out in bars and restaurants as they watch their favorite sports on the TV or have a drink with their friends pre or post game. On a side note, if you have some extra time on your itinerary and trying to figure out something to do, I highly recommend checking out a Japanese baseball game. With baseball being Japan's most popular sport, you'll see some of the most energetic fans cheer for their teams, as well as some unique aspects about Japanese baseball you won't see anywhere else in the world. I've had some great times at these games, and it's an unforgettable experience I cannot recommend enough. All of this good news is just the beginning of many other restrictions that will likely get lifted, especially once the majority of the mask policy is scrapped on March 13th. So for anyone coming to Japan near the end of March and beyond, expect to see a much more relaxed version of Japan and more reminiscent of a time before COVID existed. And for our final news of the day, over 1.5 million tourists and foreign visitors made their return to Japan in January alone. After Japan lifted all border measures in October, everyone immediately came flooding back in after a long-awaited visit. In the first month Japan was open again, over 500,000 foreign visitors immediately rushed back into the country, which seems like a lot. But with the information we have now, it pales in comparison to the amount of foreign visitors in January. And it doesn't look like this upward upward trend in Japan's tourism is stopping anytime soon. Japan has been voted as one of the world's most desired countries to visit across multiple travel websites. Though this should come as no surprise. Japan was already one of the most visited countries in the world before the pandemic, so the desire to return to this recently opened tourist paradise is only natural as people want to make up for lost time. With that being said, if you're still thinking about when you should plan your trip to Japan, I would plan that trip sooner rather than later. Living near Tokyo, I have seen a noticeable increase in congested sidewalks, stores, and restaurants throughout Tokyo as tourists continue to pour back into the country. But don't worry, even if the streets are busy, this shouldn't take away from you enjoying your trip in Japan too much. As long as you check out my hidden spots in Tokyo videos, which you'll find right here. Like and subscribe for more content in Tokyo, and check out the description below so I can help plan your trip to Japan. Well, until then, I'll see you next time.